Alrighty, I hope you seventh graders have had a great spring break. Okay, we are wrapping up last quarter, last 7 weeks. So we are starting another unit now. Okay, so today we are going to talk about converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. Now, some of you may have actually covered this last year, but to make sure that we really understand it, we're going to make sure we cover over it again. Okay, so today's objective is that we will represent a number as a fraction, a decimal, and a percent, all three forms. Okay, something that we have learned and talked about this year that we need to know how to do is simplifying fractions. Okay, remember you want to simplify both numbers until you get to your lowest terms. Okay, if they're both even, you would divide by 2. If you can find their greatest common factor, divide both numbers by that. And then we're going to be using this as percent problems and word problems given to us using proportions, which we have learned, but we're going to have to do this with having decimals, percents, and fractions. Okay, so this is our 5th unit and it is in chapter 2 of your textbook. Okay, so glue in your new unit paper and then your notes will go after it. All right, so we are going to refresh over converting between percents, decimals, and fractions. A percent is always out of 100. Okay, if you ate the whole pizza, you ate 100% of the pizza. So if we need to convert a decimal into a percent, we have a couple ways we could do this. One is always move the decimal point 2 places, so 2 hops, to the right, and then add our percent symbol. Or another way that we could do it is take the number given, the decimal, and multiply it by 100. Okay, so the first 2 I'm going to use moving the decimal. Then the last 2 I'm going to multiply by 100 just so that we have those put together. So let's make sure I have something to write with. Okay, so the first one, doing the 2 hops. Okay, so we take this decimal and we're going to go 2 hops to the right. So this is actually just 34. All I did was move my decimal to after the 4. Number 2, my decimal is between the 1 and 9, and I take 2 hops to the right to make it 194. Oops, I forgot to add my percent. We're moving from decimals to percent. So these should all have a percent sign. All right, so then if I was to take my number here and multiply it by 100, okay, we know I'd have 2 zeros and then multiply, and I would only need 1 hop to put my decimal right there, so it is 320%. Same thing over here. If I was to multiply by 100, you basically add your 2 zeros, put your number down, and then 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3. That blue is kind of hard to see on there. I'm sorry. So 38 and 1/10%. All right. All right. If you need to, copy those in. So those are the 2 different ways. Doesn't matter which way, as long as you are using which one you feel the most proficient with and reading directions if they tell you which method to use. All right, converting a percent into a decimal. And once again, this has 2 different ways, and I will show both ways. We are going to first move the decimal point 2 places, but this time instead of going to the right, we're going to go to the left, basically working backwards from what we just did. Or you can divide by 100. Okay. Okay then, so let's do the first 2 with just moving to the left twice. So you don't technically see the decimal point if they're whole numbers. Remember, that means my decimal point really is at the end if it's not already shown. And then I have to take my 2 hops to the right. So it ends up being 1 and 22 hundredths. Same thing with number 6. Example, we're going to take 2 hops. And it becomes 97 hundredths. All right, so the other way said to take it and divide by 100. Okay, so I have 43. I'm going to divide it by 100. Well, 100 can't go into 43, so I got to put my decimals, add some zeros. But I can go into 130, 434 times, minus 400. Bring my 3 down, and my 0 goes into 300 3 times. So 43 hundredths. So if I had this one again, I'm dividing it by 100. So 100 going into 329%. 100 can go into 300 3 times. Add my decimal and some zeros. So minus 300. I'm going to take up a little bit too much space here. Then it goes into 290 twice with 90 left over. Add a 0, get 900. We have 3 and 29 hundredths for that number. Okay, I don't need my percent symbol anymore because we went from a percent to a decimal. So no, you don't need to add that. All right. Convert the fraction into a percent. All right, fractions. I know that is not our biggest fan right now. Okay, but we have fractions. They're a huge part of life and we have to deal with them. So this way, if we're taking a fraction and we want to turn it into a percent, that means we are, oops, I forgot to select it. This is selected. Okay. We are going to divide our numerator, the top number, by the denominator, the bottom number. Then we have to move the decimal place 2 places to the right. That's one way you could do this. Or instead of moving your decimal 2 places to the right, you would multiply by 100. Okay. So all of these, we got to do some division. So let's do that. I'm going to switch to my purple. All right, remember the top number goes in the box. We're dividing it by the bottom number. Might as well go ahead and put your decimal. Add some zeros. Okay. So then look, can 30 go into 25? No, it can't go into that. So what we have to do then is put a 0 because 30 can't go into that. Now I'm looking, can 30 go into 250? Okay. Well, it can. So then that is 8 times, because 8 times 3 is 24, and add a 0, we get 240. So we have 1 left over, and bring down your 0. Oops, those are dots. Okay, can 30 go into 100? It can. It can go in 3 times, or 90. And then we end up just getting this repeating. We're going to keep getting 100 and having 90. So that is a repeating decimal. We are going to turn this, though, into multiply it by 10. And that means my decimal goes 1, 2. So I have 83.3 repeating percent. Remember that line means repeating. Okay. All right. Let's look at the next one. You are going to take 12 and we're going to divide it by 15. And then we want to put it into a percent form. Okay, so 15 goes into 12. Might as well add some zeros in case we need it. And our answer is going to be some type of percent. 15 can't go into 12, but it can go into 128 times. And it's that exactly. So we're done. Except now I have to take this and turn it into a whole number percent. Okay, I'm not going to say this is 0.8%. Okay, now if I was to take my 0.8, and I need to move my decimal over twice, I would add 0 to get 80%. All right, our next two, same thing. You're going to take your top number, 52, and we're dividing it by 50. Now, if you notice, most of the time, our bottom number, our denominator, has been larger than the top number, our numerator. This time, though, it isn't. So we are going to get a whole number of 1, because 50 can go into 52 one time. And that leaves us with 2 left over. And of course, I need some zeros. My decimal goes right there. Bring down my 0. Now 50 can't go into 20. So this is why where a lot of students are going to make a mistake. They'll bring down the other 0, but they'll forget to put a 0 there. If you can't go into that number, you have to put a 0 where that place value is. Now 50 can go into 200 4 times. Exactly. Now I want to move my decimal point over. I'm going to take 2 hops to the right. So I get 104%. All right. Or I can multiply by 10, or not 10, 100, and that will give me the same thing. Whichever way you prefer. There's no, like, you have to do it this way. Okay, taking 22 into 16. Now 22 cannot go into 16. So I have to put my 0, my decimal. I'm going to add a few zeros. All right, 22 goes into that 7 times. Okay, so because 22 times 7 is 154. So I can subtract. Gotta do some borrowing. With 6. And 22 goes into 60 twice for 44. And you're going to notice we keep getting kind of the same thing over and over and over. Each time we're going to keep getting 72 and 72. All right, but we're just going to move our decimal over twice. We'll go 3. I'm just moving my decimal over twice. So my decimal actually goes right here. We could say we have 72 and 72 hundredths repeating percent. Okay, and because we're dealing with money, you kind of almost want to go to the nearest, well, we're going to be dealing with money, to the nearest hundredth place value. Okay, all right, one more version, and then we can start practicing on our homework. We're going to convert from percent to fraction. This part's a little bit easier. Remember, fractions are always out of 100, so we are going to take the number they give us, put it over 100, and then we're always going to reduce to our lowest terms. So I feel like this one is the easiest section, but that might not be to you. It might be something different. So I take 30, and I'm putting it over 100. Then I want to reduce. Remember, if they both have zeros, you can cancel those out. Then I just have 3 over 10. And guess what? That is in simplest form. 3 is a prime number, so I can't go into 10. So we just leave it as it is, and we're done with that. All right, number 14, we have 112. Well, first thing off, I have a mixed or improper fraction. Okay, so I gotta take 1 and then 12 hundredths. Well, numbers can go into 12. Well, numbers that go into 12, 2, 3, 4, and 6. Can any of these numbers go into 100? Can 6? No. Can 4? Yes. So that's their greatest common factor. So I'm going to divide both by 4. And I get 1 and 3/25. And that is in simplest form. All right, so 14. Remember, it's always out of 100. So 14 out of 100. All right, so numbers that go into 14, 2 and 7. Can 7 go into 100? Nope. Can 2? Yes. So divide both by 2. And we get 7/50. All right. Now take 88. We're going to divide it by 100. Numbers that go into 88. Well, obviously 2, 4, 22 that I can think of off the top of my head. These are just ones I could think of off the top. I'm going to try dividing by 4 first. Okay, 8, 12, but and 11. But those don't go into 100. So I'm going to try dividing by 4 first and see where we're at. All right, so 4 can go into 88 22 times. 4 goes into 125 times. And that, folks, is your lowest terms and your final answer. All right. All right. So that wraps up your notes. Go ahead and glue those in so you have them and don't lose them. And then we have some work to do. Now, this is probably the most problems you will ever see on an assignment. If you want to know why, a lot of these do not have that much work to do. You're either just moving a decimal point for the first part, the second part. The first half is the super easiest part. All right, so let's look at the first section, these little column here. All you're doing is moving to the right twice. Move your decimal over. It's 153, and then put a percent. Move your decimal over twice. It's 38%. So that's why there's so many problems, because a lot of these do not take that much work. Now, this one, remember twice, so it is in between the 2 3s. That decimal does not disappear just because you're putting a percent sign. Okay? What about 10, 13, and 16? Now, instead of going to the right, we're going to the left, and then we're dropping the percent. No percent needed. But where is my decimal? Well, it's right here at the end. That's all you're doing. Then just move it over twice. 1, 2. So 1 and 31/100. Move it over twice. 1, 2. 1, 2. And sometimes you get a whole number with a decimal. Okay. Notice these don't have percent signs anymore because we turned into a decimal. Whereas the top section, we went from decimal to percent. Okay. Next section. You are going to put a percent sign on all of these. Okay. Take your 5. You're going to divide that by 20. Okay. So you need to take 20 going into 5, add a couple, and you're going to get 25/100. So what does that mean for my answer? Well, remember now, I gotta make more room. You then have to change, oops, not select, okay. Okay, move your decimal over twice now to get 25%. Okay, what about 49 divided by 50? Okay, if I put it in the calculator, I get this. But we need to move our decimal over twice to get 98%. Doesn't that make sense? Because 49 is so close to 50, it should be almost 100%. Okay, you had 50 pennies and your brother took 49. He almost took all of your pennies. All right, what about 13 divided by 40? Okay, if I put in the calculator, this is what I get. Multiply by 100 while you have the calculator open, or just move your decimal over twice, and you get 32.5%. Right, now I'm going to tell you, we're going to be picky. You need to have those percent signs. So if you need to, before you do anything else, add those percents right there. You know that all of your answers have percent in that section. Okay, we try to make it easy. They're all in the same section. All right, convert into a fraction, and then remember to the lowest terms. Right? It is not enough just to do this. You have to reduce and then reduce again to get your 2/5. Okay, I got rid of my zeros and divided both by 2. Now, sometimes they're going to be not as obvious. Okay, though, let's see, I could probably divide that by 2. If we divide both by 2, we get 43.9 over 50. Okay. What about 16 over 100? Well, they can both be divided by 4. Let's give that a go. And I get 4 over 25. Okay? Make sure you always put them in the lowest terms. You can't just do this first part and be like, oh, I'm done. No. Which actually, this one, I really don't care for it being that way. I would have moved the decimal over one more time and added a 0. And then this would be 400 and where's your eraser? Tiny eraser. There we go. 439 over 500. Yeah, that's what I would want with. Because you normally don't want decimals in your fractions. Okay, so when you get to 35, be careful on that one. You're going to want to move this decimal over and put it over 1,000 instead of 100. Okay? All right. You guys got this. Get it turned in. And if you have any questions, message your teachers. Have a great day.